If you're watching these videos in order, you've seen how 10 causes of financial stress for a young internet marketer named Chris were undermining the quality of his life. There are other major causes of stress in addition to financial stress. One is your body itself. If you have issues concerning your health, you may experience a lot of stress. It makes no difference whether one suffers from a genetic disease or from one that is caused by your environment or lifestyle. About 2/3 of the adults in our culture suffer from being overweight or obese. Many also suffer from such prevalent diseases of civilization as hypertension, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Relationships are another major cause of stress. It's not only difficult, but also unusual to create a love affair that is genuinely mutually satisfactory. I discuss that more in my book, Love and Respect. Yet another major cause of stress is that most people are fundamentally confused about the purpose of life. They are not yet at home in their lives. They are alienated from their own nature. I discuss that more in my book, Are You Living Without Purpose? The truth is that most people are dissatisfied with the quality of their lives. By itself, that's sufficient to explain why most people experience too much stress. The takeaway here is that if you want to reduce stress in your life in a lasting way, the only way to do that is to get right with yourself. I'll sketch what that really means in other videos here. Let's first get clear on the nature of stress itself. Why? It's only by doing that we'll be able to understand how to reduce it in a way that seems almost magical. Stress reduction doesn't happen by luck or accident. That's good news. It means that you yourself may become a wizard or master at stress reduction simply by understanding how stress works and doing what is required to undermine it. What, in general, is required? Since understanding why certain practices work effectively to reduce stress requires understanding the nature of stress itself, let's begin by considering the nature of stress. Stress occurs when at least two forces are working against each other. In order to keep this presentation as simple as possible, I'll deliberately stick to only two forces and ignore three or more forces. That's true regardless of whether the stress is physical or mental. An example of physical stress would be a truck crossing a bridge. The structure of the bridge is working to hold up the weight of the truck, while gravity is working to pull the weight of the truck down. Or just think of a tug of war in which a rope is being pulled simultaneously in opposite direction. An example of mental stress would be getting stuck in a traffic jam and realizing that, as a result, you'll be late for an important meeting. Your desire to get to the meeting on time is frustrated by your unanticipated physical inability to get there. Therefore, stress requires the existence of opposing forces. It's impossible for one force by itself to create stress. That's easy to understand. If there were unity, if the two different forces didn't exist, they couldn't work against each other and there'd be no stress. That provides the general key for reducing or eliminating stress. Stress can be reduced by weakening at least one of the opposing forces. Stress can be eliminated by eliminating at least one of the opposing forces. So in general, you should now be clear about how to reduce or eliminate stress. Since some physical stress is natural and normal, death is the only way to eliminate it. For example, you create stress every time you sit up or stand up. Doing so is not normally a problem. In fact, sometimes physical stress can be beneficial. For example, if you engage in a sensible program of strength training in a gym at least once a week, as I recommend, you'll deliberately stress your muscles, bones, and connective tissues. See my book, Weightlifting. Done properly, they will become stronger, and that's a beneficial result psychologically as well as physically. The only human beings who do not experience physical stress are dead. If you are suffering from abnormally high physical stress, try to get some professional help. For example, if you are suffering from the flu or some other illness, perhaps there's a healthcare professional who could help you restore normal balance or harmony. Let's set aside physical stress and focus here on mental or psychological stress. Here's the takeaway. Not only is it possible to reduce mental stress, it's possible to eliminate it completely. That may strike you as either crazy or magical, but it's true, and I explain in this training how sages do it. It's critical to understand that mental stress is one kind of dissatisfaction, suffering, anguish, misery, discontent, unhappiness, distress. It fosters clarity if we make some terminological agreements. Let's regiment ordinary language a bit and agree to use the word pain only for physical stress, disharmony, imbalance, and reserve the word suffering and other similar words, such as those in parentheses in the previous paragraph, for mental distress. Notice that pain can be natural and normal. There's a reason Mother Nature equipped us to feel pain. For example, since she didn't want us trying to walk on a broken leg, she gave us pain to remind us not to do that. Of course, not all pain is natural or normal. There's nothing normal or natural about the pain caused by a gunshot or an automobile accident. Usually there are ways to ameliorate pain, at least temporarily, until a more natural balance or harmony can be restored. That's a large part of the goal of medical and surgical science. What about dissatisfaction or psychological suffering? Is that also natural and normal? At least for contemporary humans, it is. Denying that would be fatuous. However, again, and here's the really good news, not only is it possible to reduce suffering and dissatisfaction, it's even possible to eliminate it. If you were to take just one idea from this training, let it be that one. Suffering is not necessary. Even if that's true, and even if sooner or later you realize that for yourself that it's true, there's also the initially puzzling phenomenon that many people are attached to suffering. I know people like that. After all, it gives them a kind of permanent built-in excuse for not doing what is required to improve the quality of their lives. The idea that dissatisfaction or suffering is unnecessary is so astonishing that you may vigorously reject it when you first encounter it. If so, I suggest that the underlying reason that you reject it is because your self-understanding is fundamentally defective. It may not be defective in the sense that what you believe about yourself is false, but it's very likely to be defective in the sense that what you believe about yourself is radically incomplete. I return to this important insight. For now, please just understand the connection between mental stress and dissatisfaction, namely that mental or psychological stress is just one kind of suffering. For example, we've seen that Chris's stress is caused by his financial situation and reaction to it. He's suffering because he doesn't have enough money to live as he wants to live. He doesn't want to be pinned down either to a job or to his computer. He wants to get out and see the world. He's never been to Hawaii or Venice or St. Petersburg or the Taj Mahal, and he wants to visit them. What's the source of his dissatisfaction in this case? What's causing the stress? It's actually quite simple. He wants reality to be other than it is. He doesn't have the money to travel, and he thinks that if he had it, the quality of his life would improve. It's not that he's missing anything essential. His health is good, he has a clean, secure place to live, he has enough food to eat, he has family and friends. What he also has is a desire for his life to be better than it is. He wants to have more money so that he has the ability to travel. There's nothing whatsoever wrong with Chris's having more money to travel. That's fine. What's foolish is that desire, which is creating the dissatisfaction, is eliminable. Chris is suffering from the someday syndrome. It always has a hypothetical form. If blank, then I'd live better. Chris thinks, if I had sufficient money to travel, then I'd live better. If you were to ask him that, he'd confirm it. The more he focuses on what he doesn't have, the more his dissatisfaction grows. Whatever we focus on grows in importance. It's even easier to see this in the case of a broken relationship. Suppose that Chris broke up with his girlfriend Sue. Suppose that Sue thinks, if only Chris would come back, then I'd live better. Then she'd be suffering from the someday syndrome. Losses are perhaps the most notorious causes of dissatisfaction. Have you ever experienced the death of someone you really love? Grief can be a terrible emotion because it seems impossible that the separation between you and your dead loved one will be closed. Please take a moment and recall how you felt when you lost someone or something important to you. Notice the separation between how reality actually was and how you wanted it to be. It's in that sense that always separation is the cause of suffering. It's really two opposed thoughts. This is a critical insight. As soon as you understand it, you'll understand why suffering, at least in theory, is eliminable. Without separation, there can be no dissatisfaction, no suffering. In other words, the elimination of separation is the elimination of dissatisfaction. This explains how it's possible to eliminate mental stress, which again is just one kind of dissatisfaction. To return to the previous example, Chris thinks both 1, I don't have enough money to travel, and 2, I want to have enough money to travel. Those are opposed thoughts, judgments, beliefs, opinions, opposed mental forces. He understands that he'll get what he wants, namely enough money to travel, if he makes the first thought false. So he tries hard to earn more money. He assumes that dropping the first thought is what he should do. Logically, though, it makes no difference which thought is eliminated. All that has to happen is to eliminate one of the two. So if Chris were to drop the second thought, which is his desire to have enough money to travel, his mental stress would also dissolve. Here's the point. Chris himself is responsible for his own stress. Life isn't doing it to him. He's doing it to himself. He can end it in this case simply by detaching from one of the opposing thoughts. This leads to a really radical idea. What if Chris were to detach from all his thoughts? I'm not asking about permanently detaching from all of them. What though if he were detached from them for, say, 1 minute or 10 minutes? Well, if it's true that psychological stress is caused by opposed thoughts, he'd experience freedom from that stress for 1 minute or 10 minutes, right? Isn't that a wild idea? Be honest. Is it an idea that frightens you? What would happen if you detached temporarily from all your thoughts, beliefs, judgments, opinions? Well, nothing. It's not like you'd somehow fall out of the universe. It's not like you'd lose your identity. How do I know that? The same way that you should know it, through experience. For a while last night, I enjoyed a dreamless sleep. There was no consciousness whatsoever. So for a while, I wasn't conscious of anything, not even of dreams. I discovered upon waking up this morning that nothing important had changed. A lack of thoughts does not mean non-existence. But you object. That's not even a case of consciousness or awareness. What you need is a case of consciousness or awareness without any thoughts, beliefs, judgments, opinions. Well, I've experienced that as well, and nothing terrible happened. In fact, it was quite peaceful and joyful. Haven't you? Perhaps, for example, you woke up this morning and for a few seconds there was just alert, thoughtless consciousness until the usual avalanche of heavy thoughts crashed down. Perhaps, for example, you once hiked into the mountains, and when you looked up from your early evening campfire, the sunset was so glorious that you were stunned into alert, thoughtless awareness. Perhaps, for example, you once had such an intensely pleasurable sexual or even drug-induced experience that you experienced simple awareness unburdened by any thought. Until now, perhaps, you've never paid much real attention to such breakthroughs. No matter. The point is that they are spontaneous and happen at least occasionally to most people. They are so common that there's even an ordinary phrase for them, namely, moments of Zen. True, such episodes of thoughtless awareness are unusual for most people. If you yourself have never experienced one, wouldn't you like to? After all, they are utterly delicious experiences. There's no egocentricity in them whatsoever. In that sense, they are pure and free from the weightiness of ego. They're joyful. They seem without duration. Time is suspended. They're exhilarating. They're so desirable that people literally risk their lives to achieve them for a few moments. How? Extreme sports is one way. Mountain climbing, bridge jumping, hang gliding, automobile racing, and so on. They can all get you killed as well as enable you to experience moments of Zen. The good news here is that you don't need to risk your life to experience them. To paraphrase Hamlet, just get thee to the nearest monastery. Why? You'll learn there a meditative discipline designed to purify your mind of thoughts. No, you don't really need to go to a monastery. This course will provide everything required for you to begin.